question of why is there a reality, and then there's a question of why is the reality that we're in like this. Those to me they're separate questions.
Yeah, okay, I like that. No, it's good.
I think the question of why is there a reality
because that presupposes a reality. If you say why is there a reality?
I mean, we're all obviously having. I mean, I can speak to myself. I'm obviously having some perception of some external world. That's definitely going on. Whether it's a true perception, again, this is kind of the conversation I'm wanting to avoid because it's a very well-trodden path, and I've had this conversation with lots of Muslims, and mostly Muslims, not really Christians. They don't focus so much on this, but I've had this conversation before. I would say I'm certainly having a experience of some reality, some external reality. That's certainly going on. So you can ask the question of like how that reality comes about. It's a valid question, but at the same time, it is going on, right? You agree that you're experiencing some reality?
Obviously, I believe that there's reality and that we're rational sentient beings.
Yeah.
Do you accept the same thing?
Depends what you mean accept. Depends what you mean by accept. Do I accept in my day-to-day life? Do I have conversations like this? Like, yeah. It seems like a perfectly reasonable
So why did you come
starting
to that
point.
conclusion?
Well, as I was about to say, it seems like a perfectly reasonable starting point.
Why is it reasonable?
Let me just backtrack a little bit before you go back into cornering me.
No, I'm not trying to.
Because I understand Socratic questioning and like we can do it.
I'm just.
I not understand this position.
No, I understand this position, but I'm trying to give the honest answers and not go into like siege mode, which is why I'm asking you not to corner me, because then I'll have to go into siege mode, and then I'll have to like give you really hard. Cornering. So cornering's like, instead of taking my questions as like honest answers, you're taking them as opportunities to like cut me off from another escape path, like a classic argument.
No, but the reason why it's important, I wouldn't describe it in that way. I just feel like if we're going to be skeptical, because obviously as an agnostic and atheist, you're skeptical of the existence of God, yeah?
See, again, for a lot of atheists, I think this is a misconception among theists, because the only atheists they meet are the ones who are firebrands, and they do have this like active skepticism of God. Whereas for a lot of atheists, a lot of normal atheists like me, it's not so much about like an active skepticism of God. It's more so that kind of traditional lack of belief. So it's not that I go around being like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God. It's just that every argument I come across I don't find persuasive.
Okay, so
I don't have an active cynicism there.
So you don't have an active cynicism, but they usually in kind of like philosophy, they compartmentalize atheists into two different kinds, like a negative atheist and a positive atheist.
I suppose.
But what you're saying is that you're more negative atheist.
I suppose that's a simple way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah, but so even if you say that you're a negative atheist, you're still skeptical of the evidence, so you would say so-called evidences that are put forward by theists or religious people.
The ones that I've heard so far, I've found to be they're either speculative or they're non sequiturs, or the evidence doesn't hold.
Well, I see your point.
To me, it's
your value judgment.
To me, it's very condescending to call it a value judgment, but that's my value judgment. Yeah, it's that's.
I don't mean to call it.
But I know what you're doing though. It's calling it a value judgment is like making it so that it's not like a rational decision. It's like a preference, but it's not a preference. It's like each time I come across these arguments, I try and assess them, and I don't find them persuasive. Especially because it's such an extraordinary claim. Right? I think a lot of theists, a lot of Muslims, a lot of Christians, something they don't appreciate is that for somebody who's outside of their faith, it's not, for you it's a normal thing for someone to say there's a God, right? It's a very standard thing to hear, and you've heard it many times, and you find that very reasonable thing to say, right? So the evidence doesn't need to be very strong. Whereas for me, now that I'm outside the faith, because I was originally born a Christian, I was kind of into that until I was like 15. Now, outside of it, it's a very incredible claim to say that there is a spiritual realm, and within that spiritual realm, there's a personalised
what you're talking here is kind of like a sociological reasoning. You're saying what is it? It's a sociological reasoning, because you use the word normal. So obviously norms and norms and values change according to sociological setting. So what might be normal to me, because I might be used to hearing the word God, because maybe my family uses it, but you might not be used to, because it can also be a sociological norm. Atheism can also be a meta-narrative.
Agreed, and it probably is in our society.
Yeah, so I feel in our society now, and certainly it's moving more into that direction, that the sociological norm is to hear that God doesn't exist, and to rely more on kind of empiricism and rationalism. Do you see what I mean? So the point of using sociology here is, I wouldn't say it can decipher for us what the truth is.
So I didn't mean it in that sense. I more meant it in the sense that if you strip yourself of normalizing atheism and normalizing theism, and you try and approach it in a very flat, in a very neutral way, I think even in those environments, the idea that there's a series of claims. Because God isn't, to me, God isn't one claim. God isn't the claim there is a God. God is the claim there is a spiritual realm. And in that spiritual realm, there's communication between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And in that spiritual realm, there's a creator. And that creator, there's a whole series of claims. And each of them are increasingly risky.
Can I ask you, see these words here, we need to give meaning to them, right?
Okay.
So you've used the word risky, you've used the word incredible, extraordinary, all of that. I mean, you've done philosophy.
Probabilistic.
No, but you've done philosophy, right? So what I'm going to say is to you, what is branded in subjective packaging. Because
You told me you really wouldn't do this.
no, but what do you want me to say? Because if we're going to have a conversation, we really pick each other's minds here.
I know, but the problem is I'm going to say the same thing that I say every week, which is how do you know God exists?
Okay, thank you very much. We can get straight into it.
And you're going to say, well, I take it on faith, and I'm going to say, well, why do you trust faith?
Okay, let's forget about faith, because that's not what I'm going to say. How about that? And let's not use the word God, because that's already...
But I've done this tango before. It's like, how do atheists trust their rationality? How do atheists have absolute judgments? I know. I've heard it all before.
Okay, so
but the same goes for religion.
I'll forget about this, because do you know Descartes, you've done obviously philosophy, yeah? Descartes made two, apart from the cogito, I think therefore I am. He made another claim, which I found interesting. He said, God is, therefore I am.
When did he say this?
He doesn't say exactly that.
When did he say this?
In the second meditation, basically Descartes claims to prove the existence of God through the ontological argument, which is like one of the most questionable arguments for God.
I don't think he says that.
I mean, you should read Descartes' meditation then, because well, you should read it more closely because it's literally the second meditation is about his belief in God. Like it's not about anything else, so I can't have a conversation about it.
No, but that's not quite what it is.
I mean, it is. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like I've read it.
I like this guy. So it seems like we're teaming up.
What's the
second meditation about?
Yeah, what is
second meditation is how big it is if he's full.
No, that's the first meditation.
Senses.
No.
You have my senses and this and that.
Well, finish the whole thing.
How many meditations are there?
There's two, yeah.
That's what it's 6.
Okay, there's 6.
What's Descartes' first name?
Rene.
Oh, he got that one. Nice one.
What's just happened there? I don't touch. I don't like to touch people touching. Okay.
You shouldn't interrupt them then.
No, hold on. In the meditation, the second meditation, he upsets that there is a God. He upsets there is a God because he doesn't believe that God would fool him.
No.
Yes.
He doesn't believe in God because God wouldn't fool him. He uses that idea to then get to his third meditation, which, by the way, is one of the things that I have a question about when Muslims come to me and they say, how do you have morals and how do you have rationalism? I'm like, well, you're saying it's a circular argument to say God would give me rationality, God would give me access to good rules. Well, how do you know God would give you rationality? Because you're using your rational mind to deduce that. It's circular in of itself.
But before we get to the circularity,
I forgot that. I did the meditation.
Move on to what you were saying before. You were saying so, what I was saying to you, I'm going to use a different argument because you've heard Kalam cosmological argument.
Do it for lost.
Are you a Muslim?
No. I'm not. Come on, you've forgotten me before. Do you think I was hit on the head while I fell down the floor?
I don't know, mate.
Of course I'm not a Muslim. If I didn't be a Muslim.
I thought because of the way you were talking that you did get hit in the head.
No, then I would be a Muslim.
Which is you're talking with a bit of a weird way. So
Anyway, let's.
Anyways.
No, I didn't say Quran, Allah or Mohammed. That would be weird.
Anyways, moving forward, what I was going to say to you is, I'm not going to use the Kalam cosmological argument. You've heard this before. I'll tell you which one I like the most, and I think there's issues with it. I'm not just going to say that the Kalam cosmological argument is perfect and that it leads to a perfect deduction. I think there are presuppositions in each thing. What I'm going to say to you now is that I'm going to use a completely different argument. I'm not even an argument, I'm going to put something to you, yeah? You know, in the same way as you've said to you, you said to me before that, how do we know, I said, how do we know we exist, yeah? And you said to me, how do we know about reality?
Okay, you can phrase it however you like.
Do you accept rationality? Do you accept that we're having a reasonable conversation? All these things. And you said, yeah, we accept it. You accept it on the basis that it's kind of self-evident, yeah?
No, I didn't say that. You've had a conversation with an atheist and you've thought that I said something. I said it was a good starting point.
Okay, good.
I'm willing to import it in order to have the conversation. Yeah. I think that there are very serious questions about our external world and our experience of it.
So do you reckon reality, like the fact that I exist, you exist, that we exist?
I'm not sure. Do you exist?
That's the whole point. I was
Do
just going to ask you right now. Let's go back to first meditations, right?
Right. So you're doing exactly the thing you promised not to do like 3 times, but fuck it, let's do it, right?
Go on.
Put this down. Okay, so Will, why you asked me why are you able to believe this? Because surely your rationality is doubtful because your brain, you can't trust your own brain because you've got nothing to rely on. There's no absolute truth. I know that actually. Okay, so we've done that bit. Yes, I'm totally cornered, and I'm going to go back to my original position, which is it's a nice starting point with which to have a conversation. But if you want to have like a big metaphysical debate, we're both stuck. You're just as stuck as I am because God doesn't help you out of it. Because how do you know that God isn't lying to you? I know, but I'm trying to skip to the end of the conversation to get to the interesting bit.
You can't skip.
But now I'm just going to do the okay, fine. It's like a chess game. Like I want to just go to the mid game. I don't want to do the openings.
But you got to warm it up.
I know, but I do it.
I know, Cyril. But if you want to really sieve out, the philosophical certainties from the philosophical uncertainties, we have to go through a process, and that's what I'm doing with you.
I mean, I think any rational person should have a lot of doubt about the external world. Whether you're religious or not, you should have a lot of doubt about the external world.
But that's once again, it's just a claim, isn't it?
Pardon?
You're just making a claim.
Right, yeah. We're gonna have conversation, right? And my sentences are gonna be claim-based, and then I guess I can back them up, but...
No, I don't think you can back that one up.
Okay, so you're basically doing the argument for me by questioning like the basis of my ability to think. You're doing that argument for me, which is that anybody rational should have a conversation. How do you know that what your senses receive? How do you know that they're valid? I mean, how do you?
Yeah, that's a good point.
How do you know when you read the Quran, the Quran says what you think it says?
I'll tell you about the Quran in a second, but we're warming up to the Quran. You can't go to the Quran.
You're not letting me skip questions. Why should you skip my questions? How do you know that the voice, the words that you hear in your... Come on, listen, don't give me the nodding, I'm listening, but actually listen. How do you know that the words that you hear in your head when you read the Quran are the words that are written down?
Okay, so basically, do you know the second meditation that they come before? It's exactly what we believe. Or what I believe. So if we say that God is therefore I am.
The question is, why do you believe that God is good?
Good is something subjective.
Okay, but no, the second meditation is specifically about God being good. It says, God is good. It definitely says that. It is, because the whole point of the second meditation is God's fair and just, and he's nice, and he's not going to mislead us, right? So how do you know God's not going to mislead you?
This is a good point. But let me, before I answer that,
why don't you answer it instead of derailing?
Really, the car just to get to it. He said, God wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. He's nice, good. Yeah? I personally believe that is a criticism me and you can make of René Descartes. And you know why? Because he relies upon biblical understanding of God to define God. He said, as you said,
how do you know God isn't a liar?
I'm saying, like, if you look at the second meditations, the kind of descriptions that you find that René Descartes makes of God, are ones which I would call biblical in nature. Alright, so I'm not making the same exact argument as René Descartes is making.
The second meditation is a very simple argument because there is a God. He proves that he thinks he proves that from the
I would say to you,
but you're going to need, in order to do the second meditation, you're going to need some attributes of God, right?
Thank you very much.
So where are you getting those attributes of God from?
So that's what I'm going to say. So the attributes of God which are deductible and logical are few. The ones which come from scripture.
How can you deduct? But how can you deduct?
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. You used the word deduce.
Yes.
How are you able to deduce?
So okay, I skipped that part because I thought you were aware of the argument. But let me go through it with you anyways. Yeah. The argument is that guys are really shouting massively. Before the universe existed, yeah? Was there a time where the universe was incepted?
How do you know?
I'm asking you.
No, but you're making claims that atheists don't know this without the second meditation. With pre-second meditation, rather than answering the question, you're turning it around on me. It's like a classic argument. It's like,
Okay, fine.
actually have an honest conversation with me instead of trying to use rhetoric on me.
I'm not trying to use rhetoric.
Well, answer the question.
Okay, I'm trying to answer the question.
How do you know that the Quran says what you think it says?
Okay, I'm answering that question, but you have to let me build up to it. The first point you have to understand is that, first of all, Muslims believe that the universe had an inception. That's our claim, yeah? That the universe had a beginning. Now, if you agree with me that the universe had a beginning, we say that that beginning was a cause or the cause of the universe. And a cause, by definition, is something or someone who or which leads rise to another phenomenon. We believe that cause before the universe must have had certain attributes by definition, by reality. And these definitions are as follows. For example, that he must not have had something before that cause. For example, that cause must have been the beginning, or the beginning. Number one. Number two, that cause must have had the intelligence and the creative capacity, as well as the ability to change the situation from one thing to another. Because a cause by its nature, as we've said, is something which leads rise to another phenomenon. So if you say that, and if you accept that the universe has an inception, and you cannot explain that basically how the universe came to this either by itself or through nothing, then you are forced to conclude that the universe must have been caused by something, some entity, with the characteristics aforementioned by me.
So how did you work that out?
I worked it out by realizing, using logical deduction.
So why are you using logic? How do you know logic works?
Because I'll tell you how. As Muslims, we believe in the following maxim. We believe that God is, therefore I am.
Why do you believe that?
Why do we believe that? In the Quran,
we're trying to build up to the Quran. We're trying to build up to trusting the Quran. So what I'm trying to make is the original point. This is where I wanted to skip to. Is you've got the same problems I've got. Yes, you do.
Do you mind if I just tell you why I don't have?
No, because you're derailing. It's so standard.
Let me tell you again. If you remember, let's go back to Descartes. In his second meditations, once again, he made an interesting point. He said that human beings are built with the autograph of God in them. Yeah, or the signature of God. I can't remember what he said. Yeah, he made the point that human beings had the signature of God. So just as you knew, and in the beginning of our conversation, we found it reasonable, me and you. We found it reasonable, and I know it's difficult to swallow, but it's reality. We both found it reasonable that we are rational, sentient beings. We found that a reasonable starting point. You said that. So now,
what did you use to work that out?
You said that. We agreed on that. So
I don't agree with that.
So
you haven't listened. You've either not listened to me, or you're deliberately trying to distort what I say.
You don't agree that we're not rational.
No, this is the whole point of the conversation, is that we can have two different conversations. We can have a conversation about morals or about something, and then we just agree on a starting point. There is an external world.
So you agreed on a starting point?
No. You're not understanding. I think deliberately. So we can either start on it, and we can just assume it. The word is assume,
okay, why should we assume it though?
To have the conversation. You're cutting me off, right? The second sentence
That's intellectual suicide.
The second sentence is, or we can have a metaphysical debate, right? If you have a metaphysical debate where we don't accept
But you see, this is unfair, because what you've done is you've not applied the same standard that you want me to have on yourself.
No, I am. I'm doing precisely that. I'm saying,
okay, so
if you want to have a metaphysical debate about the nature of how do we trust our senses, how do we trust our mind, then that's a conversation I'm willing to have. And in that conversation, no, I wouldn't agree that it's rational to assume that we're rational. No, I wouldn't think that. I think that's something you would have to prove.
Okay, so this would lead to a circularity, because even
I believe
if you
it's the circularity on your argument. Yeah, I believe there is.
Please, just you're intelligent, but you went to King's and you've done philosophy.
I know, but it's frustrating because you're not answering the question I've asked you 5 minutes ago. You said you were going to answer it. How do you know that what you...
It's not satisfying for you. It doesn't mean it's not satisfying for other people.
The more that you avoid this question, the more I become sure you don't have an answer to it.
You've asked me, how do we know?
You haven't even listened to it. How do you know that when you read the Quran, what you hear in your head is what's written on the page?
Okay, what I'm saying is, the answer to your question in brief, we believe that God is, therefore we are.
Why do you believe that?
We believe that just as, you know how you said that it's self-evident, or how we said, or I said, or someone said, that it's self-evident that we're rational or sentient beings because we're living it. You could easily make the same argument that it's self-evident that God exists.
Self-evident is a rational concept. How are you using rationality? Why are you using rationality?
Because, okay, easy, yeah? Once again, yeah, easy, right? No, thank you very much, yeah? How are we using rationality? If we're built with the autograph of God in it, or the signature of God in it,
how would you know whether you are or not?
What do you mean?
Do you not understand? Do you not understand like, the deep philosophical, metaphysical problem you've got? Instead of ignoring it, why don't you face it head on?
I think we are facing it head on, but you keep just making this the same line.
I know.
Look, I'm just telling you that just as you have, obviously you are assuming, yeah? You are assuming you're a rational, sentient person, otherwise you will not be.
You haven't listened to me, because I said the exact opposite 5 minutes ago.
No, you said if we're having a metaphysical conversation, as a starting point, we must assume.
If you want to have a different conversation, but at the moment we're having a metaphysical conversation, correct?
What does that mean, even?
We're debating the nature of the world, the nature of reality,
so
whether reality
why should it be different? That we have to prove presuppositions in either a metaphysical conversation or a non-metaphysical.
Okay, so having a non-metaphysical conversation, what we do is we have a conversation about some other domain, right? And we have some presuppositions going into
Why should we have
that.
presuppositions?
In order to have the conversation, we've done this. You've listened to me give this answer. I'm getting increasingly frustrated because you're not listening to me.
Well, I'm listening to you, but I don't think you're understanding what you're saying, because you're saying to me that if you have a you're allowed to have, in your words, in your books, it's okay to have presuppositions which are taken for granted, i.e. that we're sentient, rational people that have ability to come in contact with the outside world. If we're having a quote-unquote metaphysical conversation, but when the moment we changed it from a metaphysical conversation to any other conversation, we're not allowed to do that. Now, who's made the law?
No, we are allowed. No. The whole point is okay. If we're going to have a debate, let's say we're going to have a debate about the rules of football, right? If we want to have a debate about the rules of football, we have to go back and we have to question the rules of football. But if we want to play football, we just take them on board and we just play the game because we enjoy it.
Philosophy is not like that.
Okay, but I'm making an analogy, right? So
no, but this is something similar, as you know, of what, because you've done physics as well, isn't it? There's something similar to what Einstein says. You know, you've got to know the rules of the game and play it really well, whatever, yeah? That's physics, fine. But with philosophy, the whole point of philosophy is to question.
So in my first year, I did a module in political philosophy, and in political philosophy, we used the concept of justice, right?
Yeah,
and
rules.
Right. In that module, you weren't expected to question justice, right? But then when you go into an ethics module, you're expected to question what justice is, right? So in the same conversation we're having here, if you want to have a conversation about reality and rationalism, right? Now let me just finish. If you want to have a conversation about rationalism, you can't assume rationalism, right? But if you want to have a conversation about the morality in the Quran, then let's just assume rationalism and have a conversation about the morality in the Quran, because they're just different conversations.
We don't talk about morality now.
I know we're not, but I'm giving you an example to you.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. But what we're saying is, you're asking me, you're being skeptical, isn't it?
No, you're being skeptical. You're not in the same conversation I'm having. I'm not the standard atheist.
I know, but fine. But I haven't finished my sentence.
You're being cynical. I'm actually trying to be positive.
What I was going to say to you, my friend, was...
You actually asked me a question. You said, you're being cynical, yeah, question mark. And I said, no, I'm not.
Okay, well, maybe we should be cynical. Just as you
want to be cynical, let's be cynical.
No, let's be cynical. Just as you are cynical of the evidence is put forward by theists, you should be now cynical in the same way about the philosophical questions that presuppose the reason why you're not a theist. So let's go for the first one. How can you prove, yes, rationality? You can't, fine. Let's move on to the second question.
How can you prove rationality?
Okay, now this is exactly my answer, yeah? Now you can take it, you can leave it, but it's fine. This is my answer. I don't
Well, if it's good, then you should stand up, shouldn't it?
I believe that certain things are self-evident, that we're born, we have a natural predisposition to them, yeah? We don't
do you believe that makes them true? Just because we have a natural predisposition, do you believe that makes them true?
Let me tell you, yeah? Truth is something else for now, yeah?
You said
truth is something else for now. Truth doesn't exist at the moment as I'm speaking to you. I'm just speaking to you about something before truth, because truth has to be defined. Before we talk about sociological constructs like truth, yeah,
truth is a sociological construct.
Well, it can be. A truth for one people is a falsehood for another people. Oh, absolutely. It can be sociological.
Yeah, I've got the meditations wrong.
So before we talk about about these things which can be very sociological and subjective, let's go back. I'm saying to you, as a predisposition, meaning we have a tendency, an intuition, to do certain things. I say to you, just as we have no tendency, or we realize, as a matter of realization, that we are sentient, rational creatures, in the same way I believe, from my narrative, and from what I told you about René Descartes, this signature of God, that we are born believing in God, or a higher power. It doesn't need to be the God that's mentioned in the Quran, it doesn't need to be the one that's mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, but I'm saying to you that we have an intuition, a tendency to believing that. And I think there is evidence for this. And there is evidence for this. As I've said to you.
The question I would have for you is, so you've got that. Let me just come back. If you've got that intuition, how do you know that that's a truthful or a valid intuition?
Okay, it's interesting. Because now we've used the word valid and used the word truthful.
I have, yes.
Okay,
that is true.
So the question is, how do we derive what is valid and what is truthful?
I agree.
Can I have a
Thank you very much. Now we're going the right way.
Can I ask you a quick question? Okay, if we're going to rely on, let's say, René Descartes, why don't we why don't we go a few years forward and we go to John Locke, where he says we're not born with any knowledge, none whatsoever. So
I don't want to fast.
Why not? Why not?
Because we're talking about something else, my friend.
No, you just as your president, if you say a philosopher that does believe in a priori knowledge and he believes in innate knowledge, why not go about 300 years later and say the philosopher that says that's completely wrong?
I think there's a difference between knowledge and intuition.
Yes, you're right there, but you said knowledge. You said knowledge.
So let's take an example of intuition.
So I've said both, actually. I said knowledge and intuition.
Yeah, I don't care about intuition.
Okay, knowledge, I would agree with you. In the Quran it says that...
you can't trust the Quran. Don't bring the Quran in.
No, I'm just saying my answer.
The whole point of this whole conversation, which you still haven't addressed, is how can you trust what your senses tell you about what the Quran says? You still haven't gone there, and the longer you leave it, the more sure I become you don't have an answer.
Well, you keep saying that I don't have an answer. But
I know, and you keep failing to answer.
After me giving you one. Just as... Okay, let me tell you what. Basically, just as you're here standing, having a rational conversation, and as a result of this, I assume that you must take as a prerequisite of that, or a presupposition of that you're a rational mind, and you can't prove rationality, but you know it exists, or you assume it exists. I say to you, in the same light, we believe that God exists, and this is something which is a natural predisposition, an intuition. It's a feeling that we human beings have, and that is substantiated by the sociological and anthropological evidence.
So, how do you get to the Quran? How do you access through your senses the Quran? That's the fifth time I've asked you.
But you keep asking questions which you get answers to, but pretend that you didn't.
No, I keep asking the same question, and you keep not answering it.
Have I answered the question? Do you feel like I
believe they've answered the question about the Quran?
Have I answered the question? Okay, the answer has been given. You can decide to...
The Quran?
But the Quran. No, the Quran hasn't been... You said not the Quran yet. You just told me not to talk about the Quran.
No, I've asked you 5 times.
You have to talk about God first before the Quran comes.
I've asked you 5 times.
Yeah.
How can you trust when you sit down to read the Quran? How can you trust that your senses are giving you a truthful? You're not listening to me. You're waiting to talk. How can you trust that when you sit down to read the Quran, the words that are written on the page are the same words you hear in your head? How can you trust your senses?
Okay, how can you trust your senses? So, going back to the analogy that I gave you, that God is the one, we have an intuition of believing in God. We believe that God, as a result of his putting the signature of God in us, he has created within us, an understanding of his reality. By definition, if we understand that God exists, then we must be rational.
So you just presuppose rationality?
It's not presupposed. It's proven by, look.
It's proven by what?
Okay, so if you accept the argument, just be with me here.
But you can't do arguments without rationality. Do you not understand the circularity?
No. I'm saying something comes before rationality.
I know you are, but you're just
allow me, I'm saying that before rationality was God.
How did you get that?
I'm telling you how. God, when he created human beings...
Do you not understand what you're doing? You're just saying God created human beings. You're doing the end of the argument at the start.
We talked about in the beginning, why is it that we forget about the word God? This entity that I described to you before that you must subscribe to.
Why must I subscribe to it?
If you believe in the inception of the universe, you must subscribe to it.
We haven't done rationality. Without rationality, you can't do that deduction.
No, but you can still backtrack.
No, you can't. That's irrational. That's abduction. That's abstraction. So you can't do those things.
Why can't you do? No, hold on.
Okay.
No. Hold on.
Okay, so
Let me tell you why you
in
can.
order to stand here and to make some assumptions about the past,
Yeah.
you have to have rationality. You have to have imagination.
No, but what
You have to trust your senses. Things that we haven't agreed on
I
yet.
understand what your confusion is. Yeah, can I tell
It's
you
not
what?
confusion, my friend.
It
It's
might
not
be.
confusion.
Allow me to tell you what I think.
I think you might be realizing that the position is slightly circular.
Let me tell you why. I think
Because all your views. Let me just tell you what I think is going on.
Go ahead.
The problem is that all of the stuff you've said, right, which is understandable stuff. You're saying that God, the signature of God is on us. God created the universe. These things come from Scripture. They come from the Quran. These arguments, these views, they do because they're not shared across
they can
religions.
do, but it
Let me
doesn't-
just do it. They're not shared across religions. They're specifically they're not shared across religions. All of them are specifically Islamic.
But what is
Some of these views are specifically Islamic, so they're coming from the Quran.
the signature thing?
What other religions say that?
No, Descartes says it, right?
How about what other religions?
Actually, many religions.
Which one?
They assume that many religions, Jewish people, for example, would assume that we have a predisposition. A lot of them would. I mean, you can look into it as a matter of a peripheral study or something. What I'm going to say to you, can I just make one point? I think I understand your logical confusion.
Failure. Go on, call it what you think it is.
Just for the confusion.
Allow this conversation to take place so I can describe it. You tell me. You're saying that, okay, you've got rationality here, yeah? Okay. My petition. You've got rationality here. Yeah? Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem of philosophy. Rationality cannot be proven unless you use what? Rationality, isn't it? Okay, so just to sort of summarize things. The issue is, you can't prove rationality without using rationality, so it will be circular. So, I've said to you, you have to presuppose it. Just like we say, because it's self-evident. For me, that's convincing.
So
Anyway,
to me, that tells me that your religion is based on presupposition, which is terrifying. That's terrifying that you're going to have.
I'm going to finish. You cut me off halfway. It's not fair. Because I'm letting you say.
Go on.
Yeah.
Objection.
What I'm saying is, before rationality was given to human beings, there was actually another reality before. That reality, we use deduction to find that out. We talked about,
But deduction is rationality.
No, I understand, but it doesn't mean just because we're using deduction here that we can't use our results here to see what's happening here.
You can't use deduction
Why?
without proving rationality.
No, I understand, but hold on. What I'm saying is, if we use any kind of rationality here, now we're saying, okay, hold on. If we're talking about the cosmological argument, and that you require rationality to decipher. Now, we understand that the results are rational, or are sound, or something, yeah?
Well, you perceive them to be.
Or wrong.
See them to be, yeah? Now we go back here, and we use a similar kind of reasoning. Why would that be?
That is literally the definition of circular logic.
Okay, no,
That is like
no.
textbook definition of
hold
circular
on.
logic.
But we're not using this rationality to think. To
How are you getting this rationality?
How we getting this right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, going back to Descartes for the 100th time, the idea is
Why not go to Locke?
that forget Locke for now. I'm saying that let's talk about Descartes.
Forget Locke
That
forever.
we, just as we have been given, rationality, and it's self-evident within us to rationalize things, and that's why we're having a conversation. Let's not be hypocrites.
But again-
because at the end of the day, if you're going to say that you don't believe in
This is what it comes down to.
no.
This is what it comes down
No,
to.
it's not come down to anything.
Why
because
don't we just
if you
start
wanna,
thinking
if
about
you, hold on,
things?
hold on. What I'm saying to you is, if you're going to have a rational conversation and say I don't believe in rationality, I'm not going to believe you. If you, no, seriously, that's how
This
it
is how we started. This is how we started.
but-
We had this started by us
so
saying.
you accept rationality, and had you not accepted it, you would not be getting into rational discussion.
You're lying about me now. Come on, you promised me you wouldn't corner me. You promised me 3 times you wouldn't corner me like this, and you're distorting everything I've got to
What
say.
do you mean, corner? I can't have a conversation with people unless I put forward proofs and evidences.
No,
And if
you're
that-
distorting
and if-
what I said
and if that
deliberately.
and if that destroys their argumentation and corners them, it doesn't mean that I have to be quiet now and censor the truth. What I'm saying is,
Okay. Now we're into full argument mode. Okay.
well, I mean, you can call it whatever
See what you
wanna
did
call it.
there. That's good.
No, I mean, you keep saying please don't corner me, but I'm saying that.
No, I thought we were having a reasonable conversation, but it turns out we're having like a full-scale debate.
Look, man,
That's okay.
I don't
You
want
have tricked me though. You did promise you wouldn't do this.
In what way?
I think it's on film that you promised me you wouldn't
I
do this.
promise
Because you asked me some questions and you seemed really authentic and like you really wanted to get my opinion.
So, okay.
And I said to you like I'm going to give you some like honest, nuanced
What's wrong
answers.
with what I said?
I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you some honest, nuanced answers on the condition that you're not going to like turn them around and corner me. What you've done is you waited 5 minutes and you started turning them around and cornering me. If had I known that we were going to have this like very serious adversarial conversation, I would have given you much more. This is very adversarial. You're deliberately, as you.
No, look, I don't know why you're. Look, this is what.
I think your words were.
This
I
is
don't
so
know.
unfortunate that when I present evidence to an atheist, that they just say stop cornering me. It's not
The
fair.
problem is that you.
So you want to have a
think
conversation where I'm not allowed to present evidence? What kind of conversation would that be?
No. The problem is that you're not seriously entering into what I'm saying. You're waiting to speak. Instead of thinking, yes, actually there is a problem with saying self-evident, because the whole process of self-evident belief is a totally rational concept. You cannot.
There's a difference between rationality and what you derive through experience. There can be
How do you derive? The word derive is a rational word. You keep trying to slip rationality in the background.
Nah, rationality here is not equivalent. It's not actually. It's not an equation. That's my whole argument. Rationality, as you say, is you're using your mind sometimes deductively to come to conclusions. I'm saying to you that when I say to you that it's self-evident, use the word self-evident, that's experiential, which is different to rationality.
How can you trust your experience?
How can you trust your experience?
Yes.
Because it was given to, okay, this is a very good question, yeah? So how can you trust your experiences, yeah? We say, as a result of its, and you can use this as probabilistic kind of reasoning, as a result of its utility function and its reliability.
What?
Your experiences, for example, if I don't know, throw a coin 1,000,000 times up and down, you know that gravity is going to pull it down.
How can you trust your experience of it falling in your hand? How can you trust your vision of it falling?
Because it's been done 1,000,000 times before. That's how science
But how
works.
can you trust it number 1 time, or number 2 time, or number 3 time,
How can you
or
trust
number 1,000,000
your
times? I agree. How can you trust your experience?
Okay, that if you don't trust your experiences, yeah, that's why I would call it delusion, yeah?
Okay, so the point is that you are capable of suffering the same delusion that any atheist is.
No, but experiences, the thing is, experience is something which is independent from rationality.
Okay, fine.
So
but you still need to take it on. The problem is that
you don't need to rationalize
Mohammed,
experience.
basically, the question I've been going on. This is the seventh time I'm asking it. Is how can you trust
Well, you can
that
say
what you
seventh time.
is that what? How can you trust when you open up the Quran that the words that you hear in your head are the same words that are written down? And let me just finish. What you've said is you've said, well, look, I have an experience, and in that experience is I sense things, and those senses are true. So you've basically done a full circular. It's full circularity. You're saying I can trust. Let me get to the end. You're saying I can throw the penny up in the air, and I can watch it come down, and I trust my experience of that penny falling down. You've gone full circular.
No. This is not fair what you're doing now, because what you've done now is you've
fair about it.
No, I'll tell you why. What I said to you, my argument is as follows, yeah? There's a difference between rationality and experience.
Fine.
Accepted, fine.
Agreed.
Now, okay, having said that, I'm saying that as a first point of reference, we as human beings have experience of a higher power.
And how can you trust that experience?
Okay, now, the thing is, how can you trust the experience is a rational question, which does not need to be posed to an experience.
Why not?
But why does it need to be posed?
Because I'm posing it.
No, who cares if you're posing it?
Well, you should care, because you're debating with me.
No,
If you can't answer it, you're going to look embarrassed.
No, let me tell you something. What you've done here is you've confused rationality, and you've told me you can't...
No, you asked me if they're different, I said they're different, I agree with you.
No, hold on. You have to understand where I'm coming from here, yeah? If you say to me...
You're intellectually committed to religion, I understand where you're coming from.
Listen, look, just stop making claims. It's probably true what you said. Having said that, you're probably very committed to atheism.
No, I'm not. This opened up with me saying I'm willing to hear any argument. The first thing I said to you was I'm willing to hear any argument. Just the arguments I've heard so far aren't convincing. You're talking over me again.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished now.
Alright, so can I talk?
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. What I was going to say to you was that, so you've asked me a question which is rational in nature, yes or no?
Yep.
Okay. Now, you've said to me there's a difference between rationality and experience, yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do we need to use rational questions to answer questions about experience?
Because we're having a rational debate.
No, sorry, that's not a good enough answer. You don't. The answer is you don't.
Well, I'm trying to have a rational debate.
Okay, prove to me.
So why did you ask me the question if you didn't want to hear my answer?
No.
This is turning into a lecture. You're not actually asking me those questions, are you? You want me to say something. When I don't say it, you correct me. You don't really care what I've got to say.
Okay,
It's very
To be honest
obvious.
with you, I actually do care what you have to say. You've said some really interesting things, especially at the beginning of the conversation. I took a lot of information.
Before you started being adversarial.
Well, I feel like both of us are being just antastic to each other's views.
I agree. I agree. But I wasn't being antagonistic earlier.
Okay, maybe we should not make it. So how about from now? Okay, let's try not to make this antagonistic. Yeah.
By all means.
I know it's difficult, but let's me and you both try and eliminate any ego.
I mean, it was when you weren't trying to prove something to me. It was very congenial.
It's difficult for me to have conversations with you, and you tell me the terms of that conversation in that way. Like you can't corner me, you can't disprove me, you can't. In that case, it just becomes a very kind of like platonic conversation, which has very little taste. And what's the point of it, kind of thing.
It's very telling that you see no point in having a conversation where we just learn about each other's views. That tells me a lot about you as a person.
Okay, well, it's just so.
But I'm happy to have the adversarial version of the conversation.
Look, I want to speak to you.
I agreed 10 minutes, didn't I? I agreed 10 minutes.
That's fine. Shut off.
38 minutes so far.
Yeah, I know.
You've got two different things we agreed, because this is important. We said that experience and rationality are two distinct things.
Yes.
Which means to say, to conflate the two things, you understand? To conflate the two things would be uncalled for unless you tell me a reason for doing that.
No, really, yeah.
Accepted, fine. So if I say to you, if I just say to you this, the reason why I believe in God is because I experience Him, you can't turn around and tell me to rationalize that.
I'm not asking you to rationalize it, I'm asking you to explain why you trust your senses.
Okay, now, so having said that...
But you're ignoring the question.
No, please now. This is the question, the answer now. Because you've accepted that experience is different from rationality. I'm saying I experience God.
It's not some killer argument that I accept that. Like, yeah,
I experience God. And I experience God. Let's just say I don't need to know. That's the thing. You're asking rational questions. You're asking rational. If you say how do you know it's God, you're asking again a rational question. This is experience. The difference between experience.
You've had some good arguments, you had some bad ones. This is one of your worst. I'm not allowed to use rationality against you. This is like this conversation I had 3 weeks ago where I was told I wasn't allowed to attack someone's axiomatic views.
I didn't say that.
No, I definitely am allowed to use rationality against you.
I didn't say that. See, now what you're doing, you're a very intelligent person. You're caricaturing
these lies you tell.
No, you're caricaturing my view in order to score points. And I don't want you to do this, yeah? You know exactly where I'm coming from. You're an intelligent person, went to King's, you've done physics and philosophy in university. So I don't need to tell you how to be an intelligent person. You already are probably more intelligent than I am. Having said that, I'll give it to you, no issues, man.
I don't
especially, I don't agree with it, I'll give it to you, I have no issues, yeah? What I'm saying to you right now is that if you have experience and you have rationality, they are two distinct things, okay?
You said that, I don't know why that's so important to you. I've agreed with that like 5 times.
Okay, you agreed. So what I'm saying is that if I experience God, and that's what we believe that we experience God, that is predisposed to us, therefore, you don't need to rationalize it. You don't need to rationalize it.
Okay, so when you have a dream, right, and you experience flying in the dream, you have an experience, you have a seemingly authentic experience of flying in the dream. So how do you know, just like, and that experience isn't a truthful experience, you're not really flying, right? Right? So how do you know that your experience of God is not like your experience of flying in your dream?
Okay, but I'm with you. So now you're asking a rational, so that's the thing.
I'm allowed to ask rational questions.
No,
if you're going to ban me from asking rational questions, then I may as well just go home now, which is frankly what I want to do.
Okay, fine, but I'm not banning you from making a rational question. I'm saying that the base of our belief is not, it doesn't necessarily need to be a rational base. It can be an experiential base. From that experiential base, you can make rational arguments.
But how do you trust your experiences? You're, again, diverting the question. Again, I've given the example. You're in a dream, you have an experience of flying, but you don't fly. How do you know that your experience of God is not like your experience of flying? You're not listening to me, you're waiting to talk.
Sorry, I understand what you're saying, but what I want to say to you is that from this angle, you don't need to rationalize experiences. That's the whole point of it.
So would you agree that your experience of God is as valid as your experience of flying in a dream? Okay, what's the difference between the two?
Okay, the difference will be as follows, yeah? That first of all, consistency. Yeah, consistency.
But that's a rational thing. I thought we weren't allowed to conflate rationality and experience.
Okay, so
consistency is a rational concept.
Fine, then you can't ask me any question. It's as simple as this. If I say I believe in God, yeah, and I use an experiential reasoning for this, then there's no need for any kind of rationalism. Now,
Okay, so then in that case,
from that angle,
the experience of flying is just as valid as the experience of
it's
God.
not.
It is.
No, because now what you're doing is you're rationalizing it.
Right, but I'm allowed to rationalize. I've given myself that view. You're the one trying to ban it
It's
from
not-
me. I'm
it's not
holding
fair.
you to
It's
your
not fair.
standards.
So
My
now-
standards involve rationality.
Okay, so you've got a different standard. So you want to.
Yeah, because you started trying to ban rationality.
No.
And then we did have
No.
different
You
standards.
use phrases that are completely not true. You're saying that I'm trying to ban rationality. What the whole point is? You're saying what's that thing? Is it a horse and what?
Hey?
Horse and what's that
Carriage.
thing?
Well-
carriage. Yes, horse and carriage. Yeah. The whole point of this conversation is that we don't want to put the carriage before the horse.
Before the
isn't
horse.
it? We don't want to put the carriage of rationality before the horse of whatever it is that we believe in. Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that correct? Yeah.
I guess that's one way of
So
phrasing
yeah,
it.
so I said to you, how can you prove rationality without using rationality? So you said to me, it's not possible, right? You agreed, you accepted. And you asked me, how can I prove rationality? How can I put the horse? How can I put the carriage before the horse? Yeah, without doing the same thing. You say I'm trapped like you. I say no, because I'm basing my rationality on experience now.
Right, and then the
which
question
are
comes,
distinct.
how can you trust your experience?
So that's a rational question which requires no answer.
And what about Mohammed's
Okay,
experience?
well in that case, let's finish there, because that's nice and on film. I'm glad we got that on.